recording started. So I was just waiting here, sitting for you. Thank you, Charles Upton. I am a listener of your work and especially your YouTube episodes for a long, long time.
Oh,
The more I listen to you, every time I see a different dimension. You're talking from some, uh, in a way that I cannot categorize you. For example, are you a scientist? Are you a philosopher? Are you a poet? But uh, the thing you're talking, they just resonate. So that was my main motivation to talk with you. Plus, I came from Bangladesh, I think I mentioned. So we think little bit differently, but you are a completely Western man. You born here in
oh
United States,
yes,
especially in California, right? So,
yes,
but
and
you
I'm not a culturally Muslim. I've never traveled in the Near East, and I have no close connection with large immigrant communities. So yes, I'm as American as you can get.
yeah, you're a cultural miracle because the thing I was saying, even though you grew up in United States, but you talk, you think, and you speak differently. So even though you don't have cultural direct contact, I can see that's a distinctive personality, and I really respect your work. And because in our tradition, young people, I'm getting also old, young people typically learn from elder with a respect. Elderly is a badge. It's not a negative thing. And they carry over the wisdom or instruction for the next generation. So that was my main motivation. So why not you introduce yourself a little bit for a brand new listener, and we'll go from there.
Well, I don't know what I would have to say to generations younger than me. I can just, I can recount my experience, and what I believe I've learned, and also, I do understand, I think, the terrible challenges that younger people face, particularly when, well, let's say when almost every news item I see in my computer is talking about some disaster, the world will end, I mean, young people are growing up with the virtual certainty that they will have no future or no certain or, you know, understandable future, that something crazy will happen or something destructive will happen. Now, there are people, who certainly are entering the professions and going forward as if the world would continue. But yet there's this underlying belief that we're reaching the end of something huge. And you know, I was in my generation was in at the beginning of that because mine was the first generation that was born after nuclear weapons. So we understood at any moment everything could go up in smoke, but we didn't see everything breaking down at every point. Everything was going along fine, and it would go along fine unless thermonuclear war, boom. But slowly over the years, I saw that it was also breaking down at every point. So, but younger generations have grown up with that feeling or with that instinct. So what do I have to say to them? We will see. I don't know, But when you say
Yeah.
that I don't sound like many Americans, well, first, I'm not ideologically bound. I lived out my ideological uh, commitments earlier in life, and I didn't just come to the end of the leftist peace movement or whatever I was involved in for some decades. I came to the end of ideology. I said, well, these are viewpoints developed by the dunya, and they all have limitations, and they're all serving the dunya, whatever side they seem to be taking, they're all serving the dunya. And I can't really believe in any of them anymore. I can see that some of them are less toxic or than others, or some are useful to deal with certain issues, but I can never put my belief there, you know. So, and also living in the San Francisco Bay Area growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the religious traditions of the world were making their way to our doorstep and offering their services or their wares, not necessarily the best representatives of those traditions, but some very, very valid teachers. You could, the first, with let's say the Beat generation and a little later, the main tradition that was coming was Zen Buddhism. Later came um, Hinduism, yogic Hinduism, tantric Hinduism, whatever. Later came Tibetan Buddhism, and sort of the last of those waves, in a certain sense, was Sufism. And so I was growing up at a time where uh, people of my race or Americans, who converted to Islam, if you were white, you more likely came through some form of Sufism. If you were black, you came through the Nation of Islam, under Elijah Muhammad, and that was before larger scale immigration from the Near East. But that's the point where Islam came into my life. But so many different influences were thrown at us in a short time in a very deep way because we were totally open, and somehow transmissions were taking place from these different traditions. And it was difficult because if you take too many influences, you will never make sense of them. You say, well, I saw this, I saw that, I was told this, I was told that, I experienced this and that. But how does it all fit? Well, uh, if you're able to assimilate a wide spectrum of religious, spiritual, cultural influences, which is not an easy thing to do, you may come to a kind of a cosmopolitanism that it's very hard for people to have nowadays. Because I was growing up, for example, all my traditional schooling was in Catholic school. I was raised a Catholic, and from nursery school and kindergarten to through high school, it was all Catholic. And what was interesting is in Catholic high school, I probably got a better liberal arts education than people usually do in colleges nowadays. Because liberal arts is, the Western canon has been broken up. There was still such a thing as a Western canon. This is the great literature and the great historical events of the West, and they form a unity. And this is what was taught. Then, after that period, suddenly everything had to be ideologically based. We were going to have Black history and women's history and gay history and this and this and this and this. And the idea of a Western canon was looked at as colonialism, as whatever else it was called, or was white male colonialism, this kind of thing. So, but it was a true canon, and it was a body of great literature and great philosophy, and I assimilated it in a rudimentary but kind of complete form through Catholic high school. There it was, and at that same moment, I realized, and it was possible to realize that there are other canons. This isn't the only canon. Wait a minute, Dar al-Islam has its own canon of magnificent literature, poetry, philosophy, that's a whole other world. The Chinese have one. India certainly has one. And all of these different canons became available because we understood them as vast universes of meaning, That's almost impossible to get now because everything's broken up, canons. So people who try to hold on to a particular culture um, and not lose it will be forced, sometimes in spite of themselves, into a narrower and narrower ideological viewpoint, because whatever supports culture X, that's what we're for. And when people look at it that way, instead of looking into what is in culture X, what is this amazing heritage we all have, that's sort of, well, that's, no, we just, we vote for this party. We vote for this candidate. That's it. And so the whole intellectual standpoint of not just the West, but a lot of the world has been very narrowed since the 60s. In the 60s, amazing wide-angled, comprehensive viewpoint, and yet filled with chaos. It was filled with chaos, and so it couldn't continue. But out of that chaos, I grabbed what I could, and I've been trying to put it together ever since. So,
Yeah, the 19 like 50s and 60s, we hear that America was the land of free, all the free idea. People actively listened. What are the different worldview, different ideas, different scientific theories, or even different scripture? People are actually listening, especially those who are intellectuals. But if you see in like not even our generation, maybe 20 to 25 years old right now, they're not actually listening to anything, although they have all information.
you have all the information, yeah.
Yeah,
At,
exactly,
at least, at least in,
injected.
in tiny sound bites or little,
Yeah,
15 seconds on TikTok or something.
exactly, exactly. So that's the irony, because your generation fought and established the American canon, I would say, because before America, what is America? That idea was crystallized. It was Western canon. You talked about
Yeah,
it, like religious or scientific, but your generation developed the American canon, the American way of idea, freedom, liberty, justice, non-discrimination, individual right.
yes.
But right now, everybody have those, but nobody is interested to even establish or re-establish. So what happened? That's the question.
Well, what was the basis? You see, what I believe is that every true civilization comes from a divine revelation. And in the West, the West for 1,000 years was Christendom. Christianity was the basic framework for the whole set of values. And some of the values that became classical liberalism were simply elements of Christian, of a Christian value structure translated into secular terms. But then what became a more classical conservatism were other elements of the Christian synthesis translated into different terms. But it was Christianity was at the basis of it, and of philosophy, even of science. And as that slowly became deconstructed, I mean, for the longest time, people were saying, well, we don't need Christianity and this Christian morality and all these rules in order to be good people. Why can't we just be good people? What they don't understand is if there's such a thing as good people, that is an entirely Christian idea. It was not a pre-Christian Roman idea, where slavery was entirely acceptable, and you could even kill members of your family if you were the pater familias and all of this. And there was the idea of equality, certainly, but the idea of mercy and compassion was not in evidence. And this came from Christ, and from nowhere else. And so when Christendom was deconstructed, and finally, World War II is the last time that the Western Europe, as opposed both to Russia, actually, but to Nazi Germany, could say, well, we represent Christian values against this evil paganism that has been brought by the Nazis and the fascists. In a certain sense, that was simply propaganda. But it was plausible to enough people to actually work as propaganda for a while, but that was the last time that could be done. And certainly after World War II, and there was an attempt to do a Christian anti-communism, in this country during the Cold War, but it's very strange. We still had the remnant of the deals we had to make with Soviet Russia and with Stalin for World War II. And so we could see the Nazis as evil, but we could not see Stalinism as evil as much. In fact, for all the Christian anti-communism, which was usually a Protestant thing during the Cold War, there were massive numbers of Christian martyrs under Soviet Russia, under the Soviet system, and we didn't hear a peep about them. You know, oh, that's just the Catholic problem, or we won't even talk about that. How strange. So I don't know. Why didn't it continue? Cultures fall apart, and they fall apart when they lose their spiritual center, and then nothing can put them together again, except, you know, a new revelation, which we are taught, and I believe we do not expect before the end of this world age, or at least through a massive purification, a massive, shock to the whole system that causes people again to look for spiritual values. We may be seeing the beginning of that, some people say, but I don't know.
Yeah, whenever there is a geopolitical turmoil, especially ideologic clash, and none of the party is compromising, so they're getting ready head-on collision, and they want to fight. But the issue is the same kind of environment gives the rest of the people that were living end of time. And this end of time feelings, personal, especially, I'll tell you like my take on it, and then you can elaborate. Then we'll go to, with you, I have so many topics. We haven't started anything. So if you feel all right, if you're not thirsty or hungry, I would request you to stay as long as you like, because
Oh, I will
I'm
stay.
free. I'm free today. So the issue I was talking about, that suppose you when you go to college and university, when went to college and university, I thought the world is a mess and I have to find the correct way of life so that at least I can get saved or I can make other people's life better. So that was
Yes.
my motivation. So so based on the constraint and with the limitation, I managed to navigate this path. But I'm growing older, right now I'm 45. So then I gradually started to understand how big is the mess, and the mess is not fixable. So that gives me a personal doom that the problem is too big. Actually, even without the apparent geopolitical conflict, the underlying infrastructure has changed so much. The banking, finance, ideology, then what people actually want. So, for example, traditionally we think, oh, people love truth, people love honesty. But actually, when you see, people actually don't care about honesty, truth, freedom, justice. They
Oh,
just want their own belly to be full and
yes.
their ego to be amplified.
Yes. And, there are plenty of people who think that be honesty is for losers. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I
So,
mean,
so
if you can fool someone, if you can swindle someone, you feel good about yourself. You smile.
exactly.
And that fool, I was able to steal from him or to hurt him. So my area of selfhood has increased. When I was growing up, people were ashamed of
Exactly.
lying. They would lie, of course. They would have to lie. They would feel they had to lie for their own, um, for their own needs and to fulfill their own desires, but they never did it with a totally clear conscience. They
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
"Oh,
So,
I've
so
had to make a compromise, but now you got to do that." Now they say, "Ha, I fooled them all." Donald Trump, I have good, some of his um, policies, if he has any actual policies that he will stick to, I have agreed with, but up until Donald Trump, everyone had to lie, but let's say Bill Clinton, just lied. I never had sexual relations with um, Monica Lewinsky, just flat out lied because he had to. He had to lie. Whereas Trump says, "So what? I had sexual relations with a lot of prostitutes. So what? No shame. In other words, and that's
No,
the
shit.
difference. There's
Exactly. The thing I was saying that by the time you realize, oh, when I was a young guy, a young person, I thought the world it should be like this. But when I grew up, the mess is too big. The thing I was saying, so you feel personally defeated because the mess is too big, the problem is too big. It's not individual's faults, it's a collective mess. So now, that's number one, that you feel defeated. Then you see the existing problem got even bigger. For example, the religious war like crusade or ancient times, all the war today is ideologic war. So they get even bigger machine gun, bigger weaponry, and new generation of tech like all kinds of surveillance. So now the war that was fought never stopped. Actually, it's even got bigger. So, so you are taking two hit. Number one, personal defeat, intellectual fatigue and surrender. And you
yes.
see the geopolitical issue never went away, actually is escalating. So whoever is perceptive, they think, oh, this is the end of the world. So I'm saying my personal feelings of, oh, this the mess is too big, this is the world is ending, there is no guardian over it, and there is no murshid in technical terms. There is no guardian.
Murshid.
So exactly. The issue is everybody feels they're abandoned and the world is ending. I would say we don't know. This is mess. It was mess before, and we are also re-experiencing the mess. So there might be some hope. We don't know. I'm still optimistic. I want to be optimistic, to be honest.
Well, what does one? Yeah, everyone feels that, and I'm 77. I feel that. People who are 22 feel that. So, at least we're on the same page in that sense. The difference is I've had a chance to live my life, and it's different. I can say, oh well, the world is ending, but I've lived my life. Whereas if you're 22, you're saying the world is ending. I haven't had no chance to live my life. That's the difference. But what does this do? This drives us closer. Either it drives us into despair and into flight. People will deal with it with total distraction. Try anything not to think about it. And 100% video games, if not pornography, if not drugs, and just hide, distract yourself. If you're not going to go that way, because that way is destruction, just a little bit faster than you would have been destroyed anyway. What's the other way? There is a way. We have to say, and we can say, there is a way toward God, directly toward God through our traditions, insofar as they are still alive, not ignoring them, not scorning them, but not just depending upon them completely either, because they are in disarray and in chaos, and going through the traditions, respecting them, but coming to the point where there's only the soul and God. And that's a hard point. This requires dying before you're made to die. If you're going to encounter God without mercy, without intermediary, without guidance, explicit guidance from even a tradition, or the guidance is there, but then it ends at a certain point. It doesn't take you all the way. If you're going to do that, you'll have to be prepared to surrender your entire self-concept and your entire concept of the world,
Yeah,
and saying,
this is my motivation to talk with you. And now we came to the starting. So out
okay,
of all this mess, there is a dependable, reliable, traditional ideology that never went away. So that is the perennialism and the school that you represent. So we just gave the background. The world looks mess, but for your personal salvation and with your personal salvation, your family, probably society's salvation indirectly, because you never know what the society will do after you
Yes,
change
yes.
yourself and do something good. So
Yep.
now let's go back and let's talk that how you encountered.
The question is, where does faith come from? You could say, just have faith. How does one do that? This is one of the deepest mysteries. If I said somewhere in something I wrote, if you want faith, if you're hoping for the faith to continue with life and to continue with your spiritual life, and the faith that you could find meaning in all this craziness, if you want that, then you already have that faith, because you wouldn't want that if that faith didn't exist in you somewhere. You have that need. Our need is the touchstone. We need meaning, we need faith, and we need God. And if you've gone in every other direction and seen only destruction, and you've come back with your tail between your legs and say, I need God. Yeah, I don't know how to find God. I don't know what God is. I don't know, but I have that need. That need is your touchstone to the breakthrough that we're all hoping for. When in the Quran Allah says, I am the rich and you are the poor. It's like saying your poverty is the doorway to my riches. You can't just grab for my riches, No, you have to go through the poverty. And the poverty is the poverty of hope, the poverty of meaning, all of this. But I don't know. It's so formidable to get to the point where you're required to die before you're made to die. Um, where every self-concept you have is inadequate and actually not real, because it's just a concept. Every concept of the world, what the world is, what the world will do, is unreal and inadequate, because it's nothing but a projection of your own self-concept. All of that you have to get to say that none of this is going to go anywhere. Um, is empty and useless. And then, but God is there. How do you know? Because you need God. If you didn't need him, if he wasn't there, you would feel no need for him. Since you feel a need for him, he is there. And that's all I know. You get to that point, and now the question is, no murshid. Is there a murshid that can or will come to you at that point, either in human form or some other form, and say, all right, people have traveled this road before you, and these are some of the steps. This may happen. Don't say that can't happen. But you have to take those steps as if every step you take was created by your very intent to take that step. There's a poem, I wish I had it memorized, by Antonio Machado. Those traditional Spanish poetry has an awful lot of Arab and actually Arab Persian influences. Wish I could remember how it goes. Something like, wayfarer, there is no way. You make the way as you go. You make the way as you go, and as you look back, you will see something like steps in the road that you will never take again. And then it ends up, says, only foam trails in the sea. That if you can get there and keep putting one foot in front of the other, because the one certainty you have is your need, and that's not going to desert you. Everything else may desert you, but your need is not going to desert you. So that is what uh, can take you toward what will absolutely fulfill that need. That's, and in terms now, we step back from that existential confrontation naked, as who was the Christian mystic who said the flight of the alone to the alone? You know, we step back from that and we say, well, there are these wonderful traditions, um, which perennialism, the perennialist school or the traditionalist school has done such a good job in making a compendium of these truths. And the same truths, in a certain sense, were announced by all the different traditions. Now, all the different traditions are different and they need to be different. And they cannot be made equivalent. You can't say it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, or it doesn't matter whether you're a Hindu or a Buddhist, just pick one. You can't do that either. It's a destiny. It used to be a cultural destiny according to where you were born and what your race was, what your language was. Now it appears to be more of a choice because all these religions are more or less available to everyone. And yet, what form, what name of God comes to you and chooses you and takes you in battle, as it were, and makes you its slave, that is not your choice. That's your destiny. It's God's choice.
So the thing you mentioned, that there is a need, even in happiness, despair, financial trouble, personal health issue, or spiritual crisis, in every dimension. Even you're hopeless, you have a hope deep inside, or you need something. So I will translate it in a different way. You already know, just for the viewer. In epistemology, there is a paradox that you cannot know something unless you already know it.
Yeah,
So
that's
because of
what
that,
Plato had Socrates say over and over again.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And because the need is there, that need also has the solution to it, but you
Yeah.
just don't know the solution. That's why you're looking for it. So
Yes.
that's it. Exactly. So I still firmly believe with you that traditional school is like a very small source of light that nobody cares, but is still there as a witness that it exists and you have access to it. But the problem is right now everything becomes equal, everything, oh, just another ideology, oh, that's an opinion. So people tend
Right.
to overlook it.
Yeah, and people will talk about the traditionalist school. The problem is when I was introduced to the traditionalists, which was how, through people like Sayed Hussein Nasr and Houston Smith and the sense was this is not a particular school of thought, like it isn't Nietzschean or Heideggerian or this or that. This is just the spiritual heritage of the whole human race. And these people brought it together, and they have a certain way of commenting on it. But it's the total human canon of the wisdom that has come to us throughout our long history. It was like that. But nowadays, people talk about it as if it were an ideology. Oh, the traditionalists believe this, but I would argue that there's a different kind of traditionalism, or I would say, okay, but it isn't a school of thought. It's what the human race has produced in the spirit of God, and the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of knowledge, the spirit of love. It is what we have said about what it is to be human in the presence of God. And
It's like an irreducible residue of human psyche.
yeah,
Irreducible
yeah,
residue. You cannot say, oh, it's just an opinion. No, no, no. It's a very core.
it's the
Uh,
word for, yeah. And and there are difficulties with it because people say that, oh, well, so what we have here is so there's certain principles which are to be found in all the traditions. Well, if I have a problem with particular traditions, maybe I've tried one or two and they get narrow and they get problematic. So what I'll do is I'll pull back and I will, um, I'll gather these principles from all of the traditions and make a meta tradition out of that. This is the higher teaching. These various confessional faiths, as Fritjof Schuon called them, have narrow, partial views, but this is the essence. Now, there's a problem with that because Allah did not send any essence of the faiths. He sent Islam. He sent the prophet Jesus. He sent Moses. He did very specific, particular revelations. He did not say, step back from all of this and average it out and see which principles are united, are to be found in all of them and make that a special, as you would say, Gnostic set of doctrines which are higher than all the religions. You can't do that. There have been a lot of problems when you do that. Particularly, one of the problems is you become fodder for various globalist forces who want to have a religion like that so they can control the masses and depotentiate and delegitimize the actual revealed religions like Christianity, Islam, and all the others. So you can't do that. But you can understand that all the religions come from the same source. They're not the same. They've got to be different. It is the will of God that they're different. They must be because they come at different times and in different circumstances for different spiritual needs, and yet, one can triangulate them in terms of what is common to them and see that they all come from the same source. So that's the kind of perennialism I understand. But what's very difficult is once you've understood the kind of universalism and universality of certain metaphysical principles that perennialism makes very clear, it's very hard to go back to a particular religion and say, well, then, I'll just follow one of these religions. Wait, I've already seen everything. Why? How can I just follow one of them? That's But you have to. That's the eye of the needle. You have to go right through one of the real living revelations. And if you do, you'll find that everything that you thought you had to wander away into different fragments of different traditions in order to get, it's all really there, in that revelation. But that revelation is not your choice, because God chooses for you. And he says, this is how I want you to come to me, and that's what you have to follow. But it's hard to do it. Once you get too sophisticated, sophistication
Yeah.
is a
I
trap,
think I think in your works, I think in multiple book you mentioned there is like pseudo initiation, counter initiation versus traditionalist like reinterpretation of
Yeah.
the existing system. So can you just explain what are those?
Well, these are terms developed by René Guénon and counter-initiation. The big counter-initiation of the time, just to give an example before I give a definition, is the UFO religion, which is now being imposed upon us. The idea that the UFO aliens are our creators who've created us through genetic engineering, and that's a good example of counter-initiation, counter-tradition. But essentially, counter tradition or counter initiation are the primordial spiritual tradition of the human race, or the esoteric initiations that lead deeper into that tradition. Those things as conceived of by the ego, as conceived of as things that we have to acquire, get hold of, knowledge we must get in order get for power. And it's like there are so many esoteric doctrines which have two sides. There are those who follow, a legitimate spiritual path and come more and more deeply into sanctity and get closer to God. And as they do that, in God's own time, the secrets begin to be revealed. But those secrets are gifts. They are gifts from God. Whereas there's the other tendency, which is essentially the tendency of the magician who says, I know those secrets are there. I can find them, I can get them, I can break my way into the secret chambers and get the secrets and use them. You may say you use them, just for power, for your own power, self-aggrandizement, or you'll use them for the good of the world, or you'll use them to become more spiritual. All of those, motivations, but they are all perverted because the idea is that the secret knowledge of the spiritual realities is something you have to grab for one reason or another. And it is not that. It's something that's given to you. And this is what I learned from my first, Sufi Tarika that I was connected with, which was the Ni'matullahis, who were based in Iran. And I was going to one of their Hanikas in San Francisco for 20 years. And I was getting basic Sufi catechism, but I was getting it drummed into me. And I kept saying, spiritual states are gifts, not acquisitions. What you need is to wish to follow the will of Allah more even than to be united with him. If he wishes for you now a sense of distance, a sense of alienation, say, if that is your will, so be it. If he calls you to come closer, if that is your will, you say, so be it. But even the desire to be united with him or to see his face has to take second place to the willingness to submit to his will, because what he wants for you is best. He doesn't want you to be separate from him. He just wants you not to grab for him, because you don't know what barriers and what needs and what things really have to be going through for a permanent and stable nearness and intimacy with him. He knows that, and you don't. You will learn it, step by step, but he knows it all right now. So you follow him. And that's what I learned from those Sufis. And I don't know how well I practiced it, but that's what I learned. But that's what those of the counter initiation never learn. You want to go back to the Old Testament, you have a story of the counter initiation. It starts with the serpent in the garden who offers Adam and Eve the forbidden fruit and say, you can have this. God has said you're not ready to eat this fruit, but no, you can have it now. And all of our sorrows came from Eve, and then finally Adam believing what the serpent said. Go for it. Okay, and when Nimrod built the Tower of Babel, this was the counter-initiatory attempt to build a structure that will reach God. We can, through our efforts, build a structure that will reach God. And God said, no, you can't do that. And he sent chaos and the confusion of tongues upon that tower, and it was never built. And it continues, to Judas, who betrayed Christ to the Roman authorities, and it continues and continues. And then you can see it coming later in time. You can see it with John Dee, the magician who was the court magician to Queen Elizabeth I, who was working to try to come into contact with angels and learn the language of the angels that the prophet Enoch, or who is that? Idris, the prophet Idris knew, and going for the secrets, getting them, in order to help out the British monarchy. and that tendency was inherited by Aleister Crowley, Black Magician. Both Dee and Crowley worked for British intelligence, so they're very much in the same line. From Crowley, it was inherited by Jack Parsons, who brought uh, that kind of counter-initiatory magic directly into the military-industrial complex, because he was a rocket scientist who uh, he was a co-founder of the Aerojet Corporation and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He did pagan rituals at his rocket launchings. He was a rocket pioneer, and he and I think it started with Crowley, but he was working on Crowley channeled a particular entity he called Lamb, which he drew a picture of. It looks just like a UFO gray alien of today. That was quite some time ago. And Parsons inherited that, and his work was the Babylon workings. He was working to invoke a demon called Babylon, Babalon, a female demon who was supposed to be the mother of Antichrist, the mother of Al-Dajjal. And he was working, and yet he was completely accepted in the military-industrial complex. There is a crater named after him on the dark side of the moon. And so we can see through him how that counter-initiatory magical and demonological tendency entered into the military-industrial complex in the United States. And this is now coming to fruition in what's the name of that documentary that's come out, that Disclosure Project or something?
Disclosure.
What's that called? Disclosure?
Age of
Age
disclosure.
of Disclosure. That's it. Yeah. Well, that's the story. That's what you see. It's very interesting because what originally the U.S. government was trying to do is to convince everybody there were no UFO aliens. It was swamp gas. It was whatever, weather balloons. Nothing to see here. It's not real, or it was just the planet Venus, right? And all of this, and there was such an intent to debunk the idea of UFO aliens. And then around maybe between 2012 and 2017, it flipped. And now the US government is enforcing the idea there are aliens. You're going to believe that there are aliens. Why are they doing that? Why did they change? Because the idea that these are not aliens, but are actually demonic entities or the jinn is becoming much more acceptable in many circles. And many investigators are getting close to the idea these are demonic invocations that are being practiced by the military-industrial intelligence complex. And we think we know who they are, who are doing it, and we think we know what they're getting from it, and then suddenly, oh, don't look there. No. It's really UFO astronauts who've come from other planets because they don't want us to see that it's actual literal demonism, literal Satanism. They don't want us to see that. So they're saying, no, we have evidence. We have crashed craft. We have alien bodies, and it's all been proved. And they're working pretty hard to create exhibits which will be convincing to us. But it's also possible that these alien beings are giving us plans for various technological devices, or actually manifesting various devices. We know that the jinn can affect material reality from the story of how, in the Quran, of how Suleiman used them as architects, to build various buildings and temples, and also to dive into the sea and bring up treasures. And he was the last who was allowed by Allah to do that without being completely counter-initiatory. He could do it. He could say the human race holds the amana, holds the trust. Therefore, we hold authority over you beings, and we could use you. But that ended with him, according to Islamic doctrine anyway. But now,
So the counter initiatory process is not a single snapshot or single event. It's a continuous process that runs in parallel from the
yes,
ancient of the days, I would say.
yes, yes. There's the line of the prophets from Adam to Muhammad, and the shadow side of that is the counter initiation, which was
Exactly.
always there.
In
And
our world, we're seeing it in Hollywood, deep state, CIA, and military, and
yes,
especially the hidden signs that military budget invest, but their publication doesn't come out. So it's very active. It's
yeah,
not just
it's very
theoretical.
and it's about to come out and be imposed in a very shocking way upon all of us, I believe. And one of the sadder parts of this is that most of the Catholic Church has become part of this counter-initiatory tendency. There are traditional Catholics like my wife, who probably became a traditional Catholic under the influence of Rama Kumaraswamy, who was Ananda Kumaraswamy's son and a major uh, member of the Perennialist school, who was very influential upon us. But the Vatican and a man called Daniel Sheehan, who's a very prominent leftist Jesuit lawyer who was very big in the peace movement, and he has all the credentials for a leftist legal hero that you would ever want. He defended Daniel Ellsberg when Ellsberg revealed the Pentagon Papers. He defended people who were in the sanctuary movement, which I was involved in when my wife and I were elders of a little Presbyterian church in California, which was to serve Central American refugees who were being driven out of Central America because partly the United States was training and arming death squads to go after the leftists there, uh, death squads who ended up assassinating the Archbishop of San Salvador, Oscar Romero. So we figured since the U.S. government was driving people out of El Salvador to take refuge in our country, it was up to us as Americans to serve them because it was more or less our fault that they were here. Um, which it's a very sad commentary on what's happened is that opened the door to a Catholic commitment to open borders, which has had terrible repercussions with Salvadoran gangs operating in this country, and so that was probably the point where I left the world of ideology. I said this was a very well thought out moral ideology that didn't work ultimately, or that proved, years later that it had a very, very deep dark side. So no more ideology for me after that point. But anyway, Danny Sheehan has all those credentials, and he's a lawyer for the Jesuits. He identifies as a Jesuit. He's not a priest, but I don't know why. What makes him a Jesuit except he's a lawyer who's worked with him. And he appeared on Jeffrey Mishlove several times, and he gave a complete sermon from beginning to end with a complete theology on the UFO religion, as if he was speaking as a Jesuit and a Catholic, someone that prominent, someone with that much respect in certain circles. And he was saying, they're coming here to initiate us into the Galactic Federation and raise the human race to a higher spiritual level. And he was like you know, you should listen
Yeah,
to those sermons.
when you're in Bangladesh, when I was in Bangladesh, we had our parents taught us very little, very little.
Mhm.
But they taught us one thing, I think that is very powerful and still a good advice, that whatever you listen to the television and radio, just the opposite is true.
Yeah, and I was
Eh,
raised at a time
Yeah,
when we were taught to distrust the media. Just,
yeah, exactly.
middle
So
class America.
these alternative, like independent, this Joe Rogan show or whatever, the alternate, they
Yeah.
are the mainstream, and actually they become untrustworthy by this time now, because they
Yes,
used to
right.
be
I mean, you can't say
trustworthy.
just because they're not NBC or CBS that they can be trusted, certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Exactly. So most of the time, whenever there's a narrative is being actively pushed, there always has been agenda. But the issue is actually, let me reframe the question. I think you all understand. I think the in summary so far, the traditionalist school is not new, and it was not started by Rena Guénon,
That's
and
correct.
exactly, it has been present since the day of at least Abraham, because he was a Hanif, and Hanif is the traditionalist because he
Yes.
did not listen to revelation, he figured it out. For example, he figured it out by asking Allah directly. He saw the sign in the sky.
Yeah.
So that's the traditionalist. So irreducible fact. But anyway, in parallel to traditionalists, there is a counter initiatory process. They are always trying to push the traditionalists get away, because this creating a power struggle, because they want the power, but the traditionalist is the ultimate barrier for which they cannot conquer the whole thing. So that's the problem. But
Allah.
let's move to the next topics actually. Behind this traditionalist, gene, alien, conspiracy, where's the root source of the conspiracy itself? Why the conspiracy exists? I'm not talking about specific conspiracy. It was from the day one with the Adam and Shaitan you just told the story of. So
Yeah.
what's the root? What's the source of this conspiracy? And why it is
Well,
needed?
it has to do, if this world did not have an admixture of evil and illusion, it could not exist because it would be Allah and there would be no universe. There must be holes. I mean, if the fullness of Allah, if it filled every nook and cranny of this universe and no illusion and no lies, no evil was left, there would be nothing but Allah. But Allah says, let there be a universe. I mean, Rumi in his book Fihi Ma Fihi, in it what is in it, uh, has a wonderful section where he just says, this world goes on by uh, by the power of heedlessness. If heedlessness were overcome, if everyone were if God's reality was disclosed to everyone, if everyone saw the face of God at all times, this world would not exist. It would go up in smoke. But since Allah wishes this world to exist, He decrees heedlessness. Yeah, because heedlessness is the basis of this world. So in this world, there will always be a false version of the truths of God, which, as I say, are the ego's version of Allah, the ego's version of what the spiritual path would be and what spiritual practice would be and what prayer would be. They all have their counterfeit forms, because if they didn't, this world couldn't exist. And so then you next say, well, why does Allah will this? Well, in a certain sense, we can't second guess him and demand that he explain himself. But on the other hand, we can say that this world is a world of choice. That there needs to be an initiation and a counter initiation, or evil and good, or whatever you want, or illusion and truth, to allow us to make the choice of truth, not illusion, of good, not evil, of initiation, if we are called to initiation, not counter initiation. We need to distinguish, we need to choose. And that's the responsibility that's laid upon us. Because I believe personally that there is something that can be achieved with, in a world like this, where the good and the true is not just easily given, but it must be struggled for. That struggle deepens something in the eternal human spirit, and it's a deeper expression of our love for Allah and our obedience to Him, and uh, that wouldn't ever develop, wouldn't ever come if there weren't these barriers, if there weren't these difficulties, this darkness. So, if you can see the presence of Allah in the darkest time in human history, which may be now, if that presence becomes real to you under these circumstances, that's the deepest seeing of Allah. And, Allah wants that depth from us. He wants to be seen in even against these waves of darkness, which, get taller every day and break over us day by day. That's what he wants. And whatever he wants from us, he will give us the power to accomplish if we believe that he will do so.
So in the modern, like contemporary language, that there's only one divine conspiracy, and it's for our own good. The rest of it is just psyop.
If you will, yeah. And but
Yeah, that was
it's for,
decreed by Allah Himself
yeah,
for our own good.
for our
Because
own good. It's just hard, it's hard to say that. When someone is going through a tragedy in their life, don't say that to
mm,
them too easily. Oh, well, it's all for your own good, because,
mm,
but
yeah,
even if it's true, you have to apply that truth gently. Yeah.
okay. So I think that actually a lot of people today, they are very conspiratorial. Like government is doing something behind their back, scientists is not telling them the truth,
Yeah.
politician is not telling the truth. Yes, that is the reality since very earliest possible time that we can think of, because the Abraham was, for example, putting a conspiracy theory. Your God doesn't talk, so that might be not be the right God. So that's a conspiracy theory for the mainstream, right? So the conspiracy theory mindset will not go away, but it has a purpose, and it was divinely decreed if you have faith. So it will work in your favor. So I'm not frustrated as a younger generation than you, but for younger generation like 20, I think you have lots of resource. Just think, what is the purpose behind all this, and are
Yeah.
these real or just man-made?
Yeah, and it's getting harder. I mean, one of the things that's making the conspiracy theory mindset, which is very important. I mean, that's the keynote of the 21st century, as far as I could tell. Um, when we were hippies, we would become paranoid. If we smoked too much marijuana, we would become paranoid and begin to start thinking conspiratorially. But we didn't have the discipline to do massive research trying to prove that our fears were justified. But now it's becoming harder to do that research because of the existence of deep fakes. We don't know anything. We don't know. All we have is stories, and we don't even know the source of the stories. And there may be somebody we've believed for years, and now something comes out with his face and his voice, but it's not him anymore. You know? So that's why we're getting pushed to the level of trying to understand this in terms of God's will. And to see the dark side of God's will. In other words, to understand the necessity for al-Jalal, for the tremendous splendor, if not the wrath and justice of God. To understand that and to maintain our love of God through that, and to understand that that is the barrier that we must cross if we're going to come into God's beauty, into God's intimacy. That's where we're going to have to go. And we're going to have to say, yes, the world is filled with lies and is based on a lie. And the Christians call Satan the father of lies, but they also call him the prince of this world, the princeps huius mundi. And that is correct. But so, truth will come from submission to God's will and from love of God. That's where the real story will be told finally. And if we can come deep enough into that relationship to Allah, then He may provide us criteria that we can use to make sense of the data that's coming to us. But we have to go farther than just what does the data tell us, because we don't even know if it's real data anymore. So.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say like in the traditional scriptures, like even though modern scientists, especially with the AI and fake video, deepfakes, they will say what you see, what you hear, what you think is just fake. But in this like noisy environment, I really wanted to emphasize this particular say that God is Samiyun Basirun, and He shared those with us. So we have to trust them. You have to trust your vision, trust your hearing, trust your thinking. Yes, there is a noise, but it's not fake. It's God
Yes, it's
given.
not fake. One of the good proponents of that idea is the philosopher Wolfgang Smith. Did you know of him?
Yeah, yeah, I know him. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
I invited him, but he retired, so he was sick, so
yeah.
he could
Well,
not make it.
he was kind of associated with the traditionalist school, and then he had problems with Friedrich Schuon, as a number of people did. So he became a traditional Catholic insofar as you could do that, and from his standpoint. But he has some wonderful books, and he being a physicist. Uh, one of the difficulties, one of the ideas that everything is a fake, or that we're living in a computer simulation. Or once you say that, you know, why even look for truth? Well,
Exactly.
you take the right pill and you'll wake up from the matrix, but is there no truth? Is everything a lie? People will get to the point where they believe that. But where he said, look, I hate to disillusion you, but the world we live in is real.
Yeah.
What we see through our senses are real. This table here, on which my computer monitor sits, is not just a vast void filled with speeding particles and energy fields. It's a solid table made of wood. It's real. And so he said, this is the corporeal plane. Corporeal plane is a real world. The world investigated by physics is the physical or the material plane, which is a different world. It's not, it's a lower level of reality where everything is simply potentiality. That's why you can only be approached through the laws of probability. Causality doesn't operate there in the same way it does in this real world. So let's accept that we are real and living in a real world, and not confuse these two worlds. It was very important for him to say that.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the hardest atheists, like self-proclaimed Burton Russell, he even at the end of his like philosophy, he says matter that we materialist like really trust at the end is kind of mind. And actually, that's true. I'll tell you exactly why. Because based on like current like particle physics understanding, matter is a entangled vibratory field. What is doing, but it got static, and because it's static, now it has a witness. For example, I am seeing the table is witnessing the keyboard. keyboard is witnessing the book. So they got all jumbled up and they become a truth, like Bil Haqq, right? The
Yeah,
earth is created Bil Haqq. Those people say that our perception and the material is just all fake. No, our understanding is fake. Our superficial understanding is fake. The world is real. I totally agree with you. But
yes,
many people think it's not real. Oh, let's go the spiritual pursuit. Yes, spiritual is also important, but the world is also important. It's equally
yes,
important, I would say.
yeah. It's and Khrushchev Schuon said it like this. He said, "The world may be a dream, but it's not my dream. The problem is you think I am creating this world. That's where the problem comes." Oh,
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
the and in mind, it's what I always go back to in the Quran. It says, "We will show them our signs on the horizons and in themselves, until that they are convinced that this is the truth. Is this not enough for you that I am witness over all things?" So Allah says, world of matter, in outer circumstances, the horizons, world of mind, in themselves, these, I show my signs in both of them, and I am the witness over both of them. One of these two doesn't create the other. Allah creates both of them as a polar manifestation of his reality, because nothing is manifested without polarity. That's where the Quran says, of all things, I've made all things in pairs, that you will have a chance to think about it, that haply ye may
Yeah.
reflect.
Yeah.
And what that is that mind and matter are the primary polarity that allows anything to appear beyond, the absolute being of Allah. So,
Yeah, that may be second generation or third generation conspiracy that is necessary.
okay.
Yeah, matter and spirit, they are the divine conspiracy, but decreed by Allah Himself. So we have to deal with it and we have to take it as a real unless proven otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
Because
think there's still,
how can we respect and love the world or each other if we think they're all dreams? I mean, if I think, there are people who become so isolated, who live in their room with their computer, and other people become unreal to them, and they become unreal to themselves. They forget Allah, and so Allah causes them to forget themselves. And we must not go there. And the acceptance of the real world, the reality of the world, is one of the things that Allah has placed before us as one of His signs. So
okay. I think now the bottom line is in last 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hour talk is, if I summarize just for the viewer, that the world is messy. People are getting lost with too much information, too much fake news, and too much ideology. Initiation, counter initiation, everything becomes relative. But out of all this, the wisdom of the time, personally you, and also the tradition says no, there are something good, real, and it is available to you. Just trust them. So now let's move to the next topics. Next topics is this AI and the alien hybridization and the transhumanism. So it's a difficult topics. It's neither
well,
science, neither conspiracy theory, it's neither spiritualism. So I don't know how to categorize those. So
well,
how,
I will go back to the Quran and say something that is not. It's This is not this is not Islamic doctrine, but it's allowed. I believe it's speculation that is allowed by the Quran. Quran says, number one, the jinn were created before us. They have been on Earth, if you will, longer than the human race. Um, Number two, when Allah brought Adam before he was sent down to Earth to be his Khalifa in earthly reality, when he brought Adam before the angels, first he told Adam the names of all things, which apparently were also the names of the angels, because the angels are the prototypes of all things in the higher world. And he told Adam, okay, tell the angels the names of all things, or tell the angels their names, their own names, because the angels didn't even know their own names. So this shows that Adam had in potential preeminence over even the angels, you know. And then he said to the angels, bow down to Adam, and they all did except Iblis. Now, the Quran says all of the angels except Iblis bowed down. So at this point, Iblis is described as one of the angels. But then later it says, and he was of the jinn. And we don't know if that means where he really was a jinn who was placed among the angels, somehow admitted to the company of the angels, but he was really a jinn all along? Or does it mean that after his disobedience, his transgression, he was degraded to the level of the jinn? We don't know. That remains ambiguous. But then he said, well, you know, I know I am ultimately doomed, but give me some time, he says to Allah, to see if I can really, you know, screw up your beautiful human race. You know, give me time, you know, and you know, I will prove that these people who have assumed the amana, the trust, or will be faithless, and will be you know, be disobedient to you. And so Allah says, okay, you've got the time. Because once again, this is a world of choice. And so we need an adversary in order to be able to choose Allah instead of the forces of darkness. So this happens, but then it's just as if the reason Iblis refused to bow down to Adam, because he said, you know, I am made of smokeless fire and he's made of earth, he's made of mud. Why shall I bow down to him? Well, it's as if the jinn, and this is not claimed anywhere in Islamic doctrine as far as I know, although if there is any writer who has said anything like this, I'd like to know who this person might be. It's as if the jinn had the amana, or the trust, or the caliphate of Allah on earth before the human race did. And then they did something terrible, you know, and they lost the amana, they forfeited it. And the story of Allah bringing Adam before the angels and saying, bow down to Adam, it's like he's bringing the new boss before Iblis and saying, okay, you know, you've lost it. You know, you've lost the amana. You know, stay around and train your replacement, and then we'll turn you loose with severance pay and goodbye. You know, it's like as if this is the point where Allah took the amana away from the jinn and gave it to the human race, and this is why Iblis, you know, hated Adam and hated humanity from then on. Now, I don't, that's just a myth. That's a story I made up out of possibilities that the Quran suggests, but it's nothing that the Quran states. And I have to make that clear. I just wonder if anyone else has speculated that way. So if this is true, then the way that the jinn or the demons, whatever you want to call them, or the UFO aliens, whatever you want to call them, under the rulership of Iblis, the way they would do their best to ruin the human race is by tempting us to reject our own humanity, which would be to reject the amana, to reject the trust, to say, we no longer want to be the Caliph of Allah in this world. We want to be something else. And if you look at the way the UFO aliens are affecting the human race, you will see that temptation is there everywhere. You know, become anything that is not human. You know, do an alien, you know, hybridize with the aliens and become a race of changelings, to use the term from Western folklore. Or, you know, you unite yourself with computers and become cyborgs, that become robots, or become data that exists, in a computer somewhere, but reject your humanity. Don't be human anymore. And that's the big temptation that the UFO aliens are laying upon the human race now, that we should reject our humanity. And so artificial intelligence is a big step in that direction, because if machines can think, why do we need human beings? It was all supposed to be to serve human beings, but that gets forgotten. They can do it, so we're not needed. They were supposed to do it for us. What are they doing it for? Themselves? There is no self there for them to do it for. But this is one way we give up our humanity. We give up our humanity through any number of other forms of transhumanism, or through transgenderism. Whatever makes us human, time to reject it and to go beyond, to go to something stranger and bigger and weirder, but throw away our humanity. And here's where you can see the initiation or the true tradition always had the human element. It was centered in the human element. God, Allah, was speaking to human prophets. He would speak through angels often, as he did to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, for the angel Jibreel. But it was always coming to human prophets, and it was always speaking to the human center in us. But if we reject the human center, we will have another voice will come. And in a certain sense, it may even be considered to be the voice of Allah in another sense, but it's the voice of the wrath of Allah. Those huge civilizations that Abraham and Moses, were exiled from and had to leave, Mesopotamia, Egypt, were like the high-tech civilizations of their times. They were filled with magic and technology, with technology indistinguishable from magic, just like we are now, technology indistinguishable from magic. And they came out of those huge systems and met Allah alone in the wilderness, with nothing but their humanity. And so the human face of God was presented to them. And the prophetic message that came through the ages to the human center in all of us was continued and was established. But there's the counter-initiatory, which is, appears as magic and technology. I mean, the Catholic saint, modern day saint, Padre Pio, amazing wonder worker, just put it this way, he says, science is the devil's Bible. There's a very important commentator, if we want to call him that, speaking nowadays, Jonathan Peugeot. And Jonathan Peugeot says, going back to, say, the episode of Cain and Abel. Cain, who was an agriculturalist, murdered his brother Abel, who was a herder. And Abel's sacrifice was accepted by God. Cain's was rejected. Then Cain went on, being the first murderer, to found the first city and to be basically the patron of all human crafts, sciences, technologies. And it's understood that this is necessary for us to live in this world. And yet it has a terrible dark side. And this is what we're seeing now. We're being presented with a choice. Are we going to believe, which is much more plausible than the mere religious idea, are going to believe that the UFO aliens have created us through genetic engineering? That's being pushed, and many people will believe it, because it allows them to, sort of have an entire quasi-religious view of reality without having to abandon the materialism. And so
to,
that,
to,
that
to make
there is the split
human
now. That's the big split between counter initiation and true initiation, which has come
to
to a head right now.
so to make human subhuman, whatever you just said, I just summarize. So in the ancient time, human was subhumanized by the kings and the rulers and the prince because you're not adequate. You
That's
need the
right.
king.
Yeah, or
Exactly.
the
After
Egyptians believed that only the pharaoh could become immortal.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Normal people, you don't have access, don't even bother. Only king will access
right.
divine. You just listen to him.
Yeah,
So now the technology gradually shifted. Now AI is the authority. You human don't understand anything, don't even bother.
right.
So if you reject AI, the alien, they're the interdimensional spiritual, they can materialize, non-materialize, they're superior, they're here before us. So they created us. So you are inadequate, just bow to them. And
Yes,
the third one is the jinn that Abrahamic tradition is saying that they are actively making our moral down by putting waswasa that you're not adequate, you're not adequate,
right.
so you are self-destroying because the Allah protected the trustful, so they cannot directly hit me unless I destroy myself, and the gene is facilitating the process to make me more subhuman. So that's
Yeah,
the drama
yeah.
going on.
Transhuman is subhuman, no
Yeah,
question about
exactly.
it. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So that the people, the newer generation don't who doesn't know this kind of story, actually not not new, it's very ancient wisdom. The prophet warned about it, and the sages maintained it, and now you elders, the traditionalists, maintain it, propagate it. You have to just listen and decide for yourself. The problem is most of the new generation, they think everything is relative.
Yes, that there is, according to Jonathan Peugeot, and I hope he's right, that there is a counter tendency to that that's developing in the world that he sees. He's Eastern Orthodox Christian. Well, I hope he's right. But in any case, those who wish to hold on to the human form may end up to be a remnant, a small remnant. But that remnant is so important. It's like a seed is small, but in the seed, is contained everything that will come. So,
Okay, I think now let's move on to the last part. In the last part, I just wanted to talk about your personal Sufi experience, exactly how it happened, who initiated you, what is your experience, and just some details, whatever you want to share.
well, I can say I wish, I wish it had been less difficult, I have to
Mhm.
say. Um, I was first initiated into the Nimatalahi Tariqa under Dr. Javad Nurbakhsh, uh, who was a refugee from the Iranian Revolution, along with people like Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who was not Nimatalahi, but he is also a refugee. And I was initiated into that order because they were there. They advertised a little bit in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they were on the list of more or less traditional Sufi tariqas that Dr. Nasr had put together, and we trusted what he said. And it was a very important experience for my life because I had spent years following up every possible influence that the counterculture had to offer or had to dangle before my eyes, which included, psychedelic drugs and various kinds of yoga and psychic experiments and experiments in dream control and neo-shamanism following Carlos Castaneda and everything you could think of. And so I said, I am so scattered. I'm so all over the map. I'm going to go to one place and do one thing, even if it isn't perfect, because I need I need jam. I need, recollection. And so I went there, and it was very important because it allowed me to do that. I could sit there for 20 years and hardly speak and just, do my zekr, and repeat the name of Allah. And I stayed until Dr. Bach passed away. And that's after I'd moved from San Francisco to here to Kentucky, to Lexington, Kentucky. And uh, from here, I would travel with my wife to see, and I was doing this even before I moved from California, to see a Seder St. Nazir once a year, at least, uh, because she actually was the one who led me into the Namatalais because she converted to Islam first. And then she said, no, I'm really getting attracted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And so she asked Fritjof Schuon, well, actually, what happened is she moved from the Namatalais to the Fritjof Schuon's Mariamia Tarika, which was an uncertain Sufi order, you know, um, unofficial as he described it, which had a number of difficulties based upon Schuon's personal predilections. But this is where the doctrines of perennialism were getting preached and transmitted. And so it was very congenial to both of us. I didn't join, although I knew a lot of those people in that Tarika. And Jenny joined, and then she said she was getting attracted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and she knew that Dr. Nasr would not look uh, um, favorably upon that because he was her Muqaddam who had initiated her into the Mariamia. So she went directly to Schuon instead. And he said, oh, certainly. you know. So Nasser had to go along with Schuon because Schuon was his Rashid. So she went into Eastern Orthodoxy and did that until she was running into doctrines like denying the immortality of the soul, certain modernist tendencies in the churches she was with, and she could not go with that. So from that, she moved on to traditional Saidivekantist Catholicism under the influence of Rama Kumaraswamy. Those Catholics who believe that all the popes since Pope Pius XII have been false, and that Vatican II was essentially destroyed the traditional Catholic Church. Yeah. So for me, I stayed with the Namatalahis even after I moved to Kentucky until finally Dr. Nurbach passed away in 2006, I believe it was. And the very day he passed away, I was investigating another tarika that a Muslim physician friend of mine from Long Island had recommended, who's the Alawiya tarika, descended from Sheikh Ahmed al-Alawi of Algeria, who was the sheikh who initiated Fritjof Schuon. So I was investigating them, and then I came home and I looked at my computer and I found out on that very day Dr. Nurbach had passed away. So I said, well, this is interesting. And that went on for a while, and it's still going on. I'm still meeting with these people once a week through Zoom. I'm now living in a fragment of that original Tarika, which includes people in Kashmir and Malaysia and Indonesia and I believe Switzerland still, there's some, but many, of course, went with the Murshid because according to the Sufi doctrine, there's no real Sufi order and no Tarika without a Murshid. So they did that, and we're just meeting and doing majlis every week and reading the prayers and reading the muzakaras of the sheikhs of our order, and that's how we continue. And so I wish I could say, well, young seekers, here's Sufism. This is the next step you take, but I don't know what the next step is. You know.
That's fair. That's fair. Uh, in the initiation process, that like somebody becomes a Sufi, exactly when, like the person who you trust as a leader or maybe wali gives you a official title,
Well,
you name change.
or his representative, him
Mhm.
or his representatives. Yeah. Well, with the Namatalais, I was given the form of the invocation of the Zek. That was whispered to me, and then the name of Allah was written on my heart. And it was interesting that with the Namatalahis, the form of the initiation is you present the initiating sheikh with a number of objects, which include a coin, a ring, a piece of rock candy, uh, a nutmeg, and a length of cloth representing your shroud. So these represent, the nutmeg is your head. Here, you can have my head. The coin means, I'm not in this for material gain. The ring means, I am a slave to my master. And the rock candy means no sweetness is to come into my life except through Allah. And it's actually a very beautiful ritual. But so and for the Alawis, I was just given the form of the zikr that we use, and I was given a name. Actually, I can give you my name. It's not a secret. I'm called Sidi Akram as a Sufi. We
In Bangladesh, the history of Sufism in Bangladesh. I can give
Not
you.
much. All I did is I listened to a little Sufi music from Bangladesh after I knew you were from there. That's all. So that's
Yeah.
little.
So the brief summary is that very early during the Prophet's own lifetime, he sent the best of the best, like Tabiun, Tabiun, third generation, second generation. Those people came as a merchant in the port of Chittagong. It's like Bay of Bengal. And they initially came just as a preacher, but no forced conversion.
Yes.
So, and those teacher found home because the local people, like elite, not the normal people, local elite saw the value, and they are just Hindu typically. In Bangladesh was Hindu, like Buddhist headquarter was in Bangladesh. Gautam and some other ancient masters, their headquarter was in Bengal.
Huh.
And those people, because they are philosophically oriented, not just classic idol worshiper, they
Hmm.
saw the value of this merchant international uh, like spiritual path, and they accepted voluntarily. So
Huh.
that becomes a small pocket of very
Well, I
early
mean, some
Sufi
some
initiation.
Buddhists became joined
The Sufi
Sangam.
masters, Sufi masters, yeah.
That's very interesting. I
Yeah,
never.
because before Islam, the Bangladeshi local tradition was two dominant religion, either Hinduism or Buddhism. But the Buddhism super center was in Bangladesh. So, because the Buddhism itself was a rejection against this idol worshipping, Veda and the
Yes.
Brahmin
Yes.
aristocracy. So, they are more inclined in philosophy, understanding the world without revelation in a like Abrahamic way, like Hanif. So they got alignment, and somehow without any fight they all did conversion. The fighting came later, like 300 400 years later, when the mass conversion started. Then there was some fighting, but the
Mhm.
very initial conversion was complete fightless. So the Bangladesh has lots of authentic tradition directly from Baghdad and from prophetic sons Said family.
Interesting.
They're very authentic. They have lineage, and you know by their knowledge and by their way of their talking with their authority figure, like their voice tells everything. You understand? I can see authority in your voice. Whatever you just told me, it came from your heart. I don't have to validate with third party, right? That similarly, there are a lot of fake Sufis. I would say hundreds of fake Sufis. But out of that noise, there are some authentic, very authentic Sufis. The Nizami is particularly popular because I think it's a dominant one. Like out of 80% of Sufi, directly or indirectly, Nizami and Chishti. You know Chishti?
Yeah, interesting. The apostle to the hippies was
Yes.
a man called Samuel Lewis. He was called Sufi Sam, and
Okay.
he was a Chishti initiate. And
Chishti. Yeah.
he was one of these people saying, "Well, I'll teach Sufism to the hippies because they're open, and whether they later become Muslims or not, we'll see." This kind of, and it was, it was rather suspect in that. But he was initiated a Chishti, and also he had some initiations from Central Asia, whether he
Yeah.
was Pulravi or something, I don't know what it was. But he was an important spiritual figure for a while during the 60s. So
Mhm. The
yeah.
one thing I can say for sure, out of a lot of fake Sufi, there are some real, authentic, biological lineage and master-based Sufi in Bangladesh. They
Well,
migrated from Iran and Iraq during the massacre, so they came here. Their
yeah.
family belongs to the Prophet's family.
Yeah, in Marin County, California, where I grew up, and that's also where Samuel Lewis grew up in Fairfax. Another group that was in a lineage like that was Jalaluddin Loras, who was the son, I believe, of Suleiman Dede, who
Hmm. Hmm.
was the sheikh or caretaker or whatever he was called at that point of the Mevlevi Sufi order. And I remember, he would put on exhibits of turning, of Mevlevi turning for the public. And here in Lexington, some of the Mevlevis, the Turkish Mevlevis of today, who I call the Ballet Folklorico of Turkey, came and did
Hmm.
the same thing at a theater here, and it wasn't real. You know, I mean, they mimed being slain in the spirit. They would turn it on, they would fall. I said, oh yeah, I've seen a routine.
Yeah,
But what Jalaluddin Loris did was deep, was true. Once there was a gymnasium at the College of Marin, and many people came to see this exhibition. But what happened is he got the audience. He says, "Come down, you do it." He called the audience down. You become and he marshaled this whole group of people who had never done this before in their lives, and made out of them a magnificent, a turning, a mandala of Mevlevi dancing, just with the power of his attention. We all became part of it, and that's the only time I actually did Mevlevi turning. But
mm,
so there was, a degree of that kind of power coming through him nonetheless. So
mm. The main problem I would say for the Bangladeshi real Sufi masters, the actual, they don't talk English. That's the problem. They talk in Bengali and Arabic. They're the master of Arabic language and they are born and raised as Bengali.
yeah.
So, but luckily I still speak Bengali. So I recently had one podcast with one of the Sufi master. It's in my channel. I posted. But it was in Bengali. So I can give you a gist English transcript that I did, the conversation with him. And he understands English, but he's not fluent in talking out.
uh Memorized, but I need to read a surah of the Quran, and I can only read it well
Yes, please.
in English. So somewhere I have my glasses. Who knows where they are? Okay. So it's the last surah of the Quran, is the Surah An-Nas, which is the Surah of humanity. And the reason I say that this is the last Surah of the Quran is because it came to the Prophet Muhammad in order to protect us from the last temptation that the human race will be subject to in this cycle of existence. And, maybe you will be able to pronounce it in Arabic because I'm very bad in Arabic. So,
Yeah, I'm also not native speaker, but I know Surah Nas. Auzu
yeah.
billahi minash
And
shaitanir
that's
rajim.
so in English,
Bismillahir rahmanir rahim.
in
Kul
English,
auzu bi rabbin nas,
yeah.
malikin nas, ilahin nas, min sharri
And
waswasi
what's
khannas,
uh,
allazi waswasu fi sudurin nas, minan jinnati wan nas.
yes. In English, it says, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaking whisperer who whispereth in the hearts of mankind, of the jinn and of mankind. And that whispering is saying, as you say, the human is useless and secondary and obsolete. And so reject the human form. It's simply a burden and a shame, and you can become part of something greater, something inhuman. And that's the temptation, that's exactly the choice we are being given, the ultimate choice. It used to be we could only reject the human form by becoming involved in this or that kind of recognizable sin, by being eaten up by anger, or eaten up by lust, or eaten up by greed, or something like that, or by denying the existence of Allah, But now we're being given the chance to actually reject our own humanity literally, completely. And there are those who will say, well, sure, that's the next thing, isn't it? Is to reject our humanity. So if the perennial tradition, the primordial tradition, and what the perennialists teach has any epitome, any essence, it is stay human, because we can only relate to Allah through our humanity, because that's who we are. And if we go into some relation to higher, if you will, powers, more spiritual powers, without our humanity, we are going into, into the fire, directly into the fire, uh, as if that's what we wanted all along. So, and if people want it, they can have it. I'm not going to make that choice, I made a different choice already.
Yeah, I hope the younger generation will listen to you and your work, your books, and this conversation, for example, and they will have some hope and some strength and some trust to trust in their own humanity, plus the reality of the world, and God has made them with a purpose and trust. Like then you see the world little bit differently, and you can do things better for the next generation,
Yes,
if not living in the last generation, for example.
yes, and and if it's all done for Allah, then you've done the best you can for the world and for future generations. But you cannot put even those most important considerations first. You have to put Allah first, and then out of that will come, as it always has, um, what is best for the human race as a whole. So,
Yeah, I think we'll meet again definitely because this is the first, and next time we'll focus ultra laser focus on one particular topics. Today we talked about everything from
Everything.
biography to history to
Well, we got to the essence of the perennial philosophy versus the counter initiation and how that works with UFOs. And we did enough of that, to give people something to chew on. So,
okay. Okay, so I'll stop the recording. Thank you
yes,
for being with us, and I hope I'll meet again with you. Okay.
yes.